Most front yards don't look bad because the house is ugly. They look bad because of this. Massive, overgrown shrubs, plants swallowing windows, dark green blobs planted against the foundation 15 years ago that now make the entire house feel older, heavier, and honestly, kind of forgotten. And the worst part? Most homeowners keep replacing flowers every spring without realizing the real problem is the foundation planting itself. Because once the structure around your house looks wrong, nothing else really fixes it. Not the mulch, not the annuals, not the hanging baskets. That's why some homes instantly look clean, expensive, intentional, while others feel dated the second you pull into the driveway. Today, we're fixing that. I'm going to show you 7 foundation plants that actually improve curb appeal long-term, plants that stay manageable, plants that work with real American homes, plants that survive real weather, and plants that make your house look professionally landscaped without becoming a maintenance nightmare 5 years later. And these are not random nursery recommendations. I'll show you the exact varieties that actually perform where they work best, what most homeowners get wrong, and how to avoid the expensive mistakes that ruin foundation plantings over time. Because foundation planting is not decoration, it's structure. It changes how your house feels, how large it looks, how modern it feels, and, honestly, how expensive your property looks from the street. And one bad plant choice near your foundation can quietly create years of problems. Overgrown roots, blocked windows, trapped moisture, constant pruning, dead empty spaces every winter. Most of those mistakes start with plants that never should have been there in the first place. So before you spend another dollar at the garden center, here are the 7 foundation plants I'd use to make almost any American house look dramatically better. But before we get into the plants, drop your US state down in the comments. I genuinely use those comments when planning future videos because gardening in Arizona is completely different from gardening in Michigan or coastal Carolina. And if you enjoy practical gardening advice that actually helps homeowners avoid expensive mistakes, subscribe. New videos every week. Real plants, real landscaping advice. No filler, no sponsored nonsense disguised as recommendations. All right, let's start with the plant that probably improves more front yards than any other, and somehow still gets underestimated constantly. Plant 1, boxwood. Now I know exactly what some of you are thinking already. Boxwoods are boring, and honestly, I understand why people say that. Because most homeowners only notice boxwoods when they've been neglected for 20 years and turned into giant green meatballs swallowing the front porch. But properly used boxwoods? They are one of the most important foundation plants in American landscaping for a reason. Not because they're trendy, because they solve problems. The biggest thing boxwoods give you is structure. Real, year-round structure. Most plants disappear emotionally in winter. Perennials die back. Flowers vanish. Trees lose leaves. And suddenly the front of the house feels empty and unfinished for almost half the year. Good boxwoods prevent that. They keep your foundation planting looking intentional in January, not just in May. That matters more than people realize, because curb appeal is not seasonal. Your house makes an impression every single day of the year. The variety I recommend most often for modern foundation planting is winter gem boxwood. It stays dense, keeps a rich green color through winter, handles shaping extremely well, and most importantly, it stays manageable. That's critical. Most foundation problems happen because people choose plants that eventually become too large for the space. Winter gem usually matures around 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide, large enough to create structure without eventually covering windows or crushing walkways. For colder climates, especially Zone 4 gardens, Chicago green boxwood is one of the most reliable choices available. It handles brutal winter temperatures significantly better than many older boxwood varieties and keeps better color through harsh winters. And if you want something more compact and slightly faster filling, Sprinter boxwood is becoming extremely popular for newer suburban landscapes. Now here's the mistake most homeowners make with boxwoods. They overfeed them. People want faster growth, so they fertilize aggressively, trying to force fullness. And what they actually create is weak, soft growth that becomes vulnerable to disease and winter damage. Healthy boxwoods are not supposed to grow aggressively. That compact, dense structure is the entire point. Lean soil, consistent moisture during establishment, one light trim per year. That's basically the maintenance program. And one more important thing, never plant boxwoods directly against the foundation wall. I know small shrubs look tiny at the nursery, and it feels wrong leaving open space, but give them time. A healthy boxwood spreads, and once shrubs press against siding, you create trapped moisture, reduced airflow, and ideal conditions for insects and mold. 2 to 3 feet minimum from the foundation wall, always. That one decision alone prevents an unbelievable number of long-term landscaping problems. And visually, it actually looks better too, because the plant has room to keep its natural shape instead of getting smashed flat against the house. Now, boxwoods give you structure, but structure alone doesn't create a memorable front yard. You also need softness, movement, and something that makes people actually slow down when they drive past. And the next plant does exactly that. Plant 2 hydrangeas. Now, if boxwoods are the structure of a front yard, hydrangeas are the emotion. They're the thing people actually notice from the street. And when they're used correctly near a foundation, they can completely change how expensive a house feels. But I need to say something important here, because hydrangeas have developed a reputation for being difficult. A lot of homeowners buy one, plant it, get leaves but no blooms, and then spend the next 2 summers thinking they somehow failed. Usually, the plant wasn't the problem. The problem was wrong variety, wrong placement, or bad pruning timing. That's it. And once you fix those 3 things, hydrangeas become one of the most rewarding plants you can grow around a house. The first variety I'd seriously look at for foundation planting is Limelight Hydrangea. And honestly, this plant is one of the biggest reasons modern suburban landscaping looks so much better than it did 20 years ago. The blooms start light green, almost chartreuse, then slowly transition to creamy white, then soft pink as fall approaches. That color progression gives the plant movement across the season. It never feels static. And unlike older hydrangea varieties that collapse after heavy rain, Limelight stays upright extremely well. That matters near a foundation, because floppy plants instantly make landscaping feel messy and outdated. Limelight works best in USDA zones 3 through 8, which covers a huge percentage of American homeowners. Now, if you want something slightly more compact for smaller front yards, Little Lime is probably the better choice. Same overall look, same beautiful blooms, but easier to manage near windows and walkways. And for warmer southern climates, Incredible Hydrangea performs extremely well because it blooms on new wood. That phrase matters more than most homeowners realize. Blooming on new wood means even if winter damages the plant or late frosts hit hard, the shrub still flowers on fresh spring growth. That reliability is incredibly important in colder climates where older hydrangea varieties sometimes produce nothing but leaves. Now, here's where most people accidentally ruin hydrangeas: pruning at the wrong time. And this happens constantly. People see sticks in winter, panic, cut everything down, and unknowingly remove all the flower buds for the next season. Some hydrangeas bloom on old wood, some bloom on new wood. Those are completely different pruning schedules. If your hydrangea blooms on new wood, like Limelight or Incredible, you can prune aggressively in late winter or early spring. But old wood bloomers, especially many blue mophead hydrangeas, should only be pruned after flowering. That one mistake alone explains thousands of "my hydrangea never blooms" comments online every summer. Placement matters too. Hydrangeas want morning sun, protection from harsh afternoon heat, and consistent moisture while establishing. The east side of a house is often perfect, especially in hotter states where western afternoon sun becomes brutal by July. And one thing I wish more homeowners understood: hydrangeas do not need constant babying forever. Once established, especially with good mulch, they become significantly more resilient than people think. Now, visually, hydrangeas do something very important near a foundation. They soften architecture. Most houses have hard corners, straight lines, rigid edges. sharp transitions. Hydrangeas interrupt that rigidity. Those huge blooms create softness and movement that makes the entire property feel more welcoming. And psychologically, people respond strongly to that. It makes the house feel cared for, calmer, more luxurious, more intentional. That's why hydrangeas show up constantly in higher-end suburban landscaping. Not because landscapers lack creativity, because they work. Now, if hydrangeas soften a house, the next plant completely transforms the darkest, most frustrating side of it. Plant 3, hostas. And honestly, hostas may be the most misunderstood foundation plant in American gardening, because people think of hostas as boring filler plants. They are not filler plants. They are one of the best tools you have for making shaded areas look lush and intentional. Most homeowners struggle with the shaded side of the house. The grass grows poorly, the soil stays dry under roof overhangs, and nothing seems to look full for very long. Hostas solve that problem better than almost anything else. Because unlike most plants, hostas actually prefer shade. They thrive there. And what they create visually is incredibly important: texture. Most foundation beds fail because everything sits at the same visual level. Same leaf size, same shrub shape, same green tone. Hostas immediately break that up. Large, layered leaves, different colors, different forms, different heights. That variation makes landscaping feel professionally designed almost instantly. One of the best large varieties available is Sum and Substance, and this plant gets huge, massive gold-green leaves, sometimes nearly dinner plate-sized in mature plantings. In shade, those bright leaves almost glow, especially against dark mulch, brick, stone, or evergreen shrubs. For cooler blue-green tones, Halcyon hosta is one of the most reliable varieties available. Very clean color, excellent texture, and extremely elegant in layered foundation beds. And for edging or smaller spaces, blue mouse ears is one of the best compact hostas ever introduced. Dense, neat, easy to maintain. Perfect for front borders. Now here's one of the biggest advantages of hostas. They multiply, and that matters financially. A single healthy hosta eventually becomes several plants. After a few years, you divide the clump in early spring, and suddenly, one plant becomes 2, then 4, then 6. That's why older established gardens often have incredible hosta displays without huge ongoing costs. Now there is one issue with hostas everyone knows about: slugs. And honestly, if you stay ahead of them early, they're manageable. Iron phosphate slug bait works extremely well and is much safer around pets and wildlife than older chemical products. Apply it early in spring before damage begins, and you usually avoid major issues entirely. And visually, hostas do something very few plants can do near a foundation. They make shade feel intentional instead of neglected. That's huge, because the shaded side of a house often determines whether landscaping feels professionally designed or like an afterthought. Now, we've covered structure, we've covered softness, we've covered shade. But the next plant solves one of the biggest modern landscaping problems of all: how to make a front yard feel lighter, cleaner, and more modern without increasing maintenance. Plant 4, Juniper. And honestly, this may be the most underrated foundation plant in American landscaping, because most people still picture those giant, overgrown, prickly shrubs from the 1980s that swallowed entire ranch houses. That's not what modern junipers look like anymore. The newer varieties available today are cleaner, more architectural, and significantly better suited for modern foundation planting. And the biggest advantage they give you? Reliability. Junipers handle conditions that quietly destroy other landscaping plants: dry soil, rocky soil, poor soil, brutal summer heat, winter wind, drought, neglect. And once established, many of them need almost nothing from you. That combination is becoming incredibly important now that more homeowners are moving toward lower maintenance front yards. One of the best varieties for foundation beds is Blue Star Juniper. Soft, silver blue foliage, compact rounded form, very clean shape. And visually, that blue color changes everything. Most foundation beds use too much standard dark green. Blue Star immediately breaks that visual heaviness and makes landscaping feel lighter and more modern. It works especially well against brick, dark mulch, white siding, stone foundations, and modern black trim homes. Now, if your house feels low or visually flat from the street, skyrocket juniper becomes extremely powerful. This plant grows tall and narrow instead of wide, which means you can place one near a front entry or corner and instantly create vertical movement without taking up huge amounts of space. That's one of the secrets professional landscapers use constantly: vertical accents. Without them, foundation plantings often feel low and heavy. One vertical evergreen can completely rebalance the proportions of a front yard. And if you need something for slopes, edges, or transitions into the lawn, blue rug juniper is one of the best ground cover evergreens available. It spreads beautifully, suppresses weeds, handles drought extremely well, and, unlike mulch, it actually becomes more attractive over time. Now, here's something very important about junipers. Never aggressively cut into old brown wood. Junipers do not regenerate the way many shrubs do. If you cut deep into the dead interior, that section usually stays bare permanently, light shaping only. Honestly, the less you interfere with modern junipers, the better they usually look. And visually, junipers solve a major modern landscaping problem. They make front yards feel cleaner. Most outdated landscaping feels too dense, too dark, too crowded. Junipers add space, cooler tones, and cleaner structure. That's why they're showing up constantly now in newer luxury landscaping projects. Now, if junipers make landscaping feel cleaner, the next plant makes it feel alive. Plant 5, lavender. And this plant completely changes the emotional feeling of a front yard, because lavender does something most foundation plants never do. It engages the senses: movement, fragrance, pollinators, texture. The moment lavender blooms near a front walkway, people notice it, and psychologically, that changes how the house feels. Suddenly, the landscaping feels calmer, softer, more welcoming, more intentional, especially in the evening when the fragrance becomes stronger. Now, most people think of lavender as a backyard herb garden plant, but modern landscaping designers are using it heavily in foundation beds now, especially around farmhouse homes, cottage gardens, modern organic landscapes, Mediterranean-inspired front yards. And honestly, it works beautifully. One of the best varieties for American homeowners is phenomenal lavender. The name sounds dramatic, but it earned that reputation. It handles humidity significantly better than traditional English lavender, which is critical in many American climates, because older lavender varieties often collapse in humid summers. Phenomenal stays upright, keeps strong fragrance, and survives heat extremely well. For cooler northern climates, Munstead lavender remains one of the most reliable classic choices available. Compact, cold-hardy, beautiful color. Now here's the part that surprises most people. Lavender actually prefers struggle, and that's where homeowners accidentally kill it. People plant lavender into rich, heavily amended soil, fertilize aggressively, mulch heavily around the crown, and slowly rot the plant. Lavender evolved in dry, rocky Mediterranean conditions. It wants lean soil, excellent drainage, full sun, airflow. Too much water is usually more dangerous than too little. That's why lavender often performs better beside walkways and foundations, where drainage naturally improves. And visually, lavender creates one of the most valuable effects in landscaping: movement. Most foundation beds feel static. Lavender moves in the wind. Pollinators constantly visit it. The flower spikes shift with light throughout the day. That movement makes landscaping feel expensive because it feels dynamic instead of frozen. And honestly, few plants photograph better around homes than lavender during golden hour evening light. Now, we've covered structure, we've covered softness, we've covered texture and movement, but the final plant completely changes the personality of a front yard. Plant 6, Dwarf Japanese Maple. And this is the plant most homeowners walk past at the nursery, want deeply, and then talk themselves out of buying. Usually because they assume it's too delicate, too difficult, too expensive, or too advanced for regular homeowners. Most of that fear is exaggerated. A good Japanese maple is actually one of the best long-term landscaping investments you can make. Because unlike fast-growing shrubs that eventually become maintenance problems, Japanese maples age beautifully. That's rare. Every year they become more sculptural, more layered, more elegant. And eventually, they become the plant people remember about the house, especially near an entryway. Now, the classic variety most homeowners know is Bloodgood, deep burgundy foliage through most of the season, followed by brilliant scarlet fall color. And the shape naturally looks elegant without heavy pruning. That's important because heavily pruned landscaping often looks forced and artificial. Japanese maples look best when they're allowed to develop naturally. For smaller spaces, Shana Japanese maple is one of the best compact forms available. Dense growth, excellent red color, much easier to fit into modern suburban front yards. And if you want something softer and more dramatic, Tamukeyama creates a cascading lace leaf shape that almost feels architectural near stone pathways or front corners. Now, placement matters enormously with Japanese maples. Morning sun, protection from brutal western afternoon heat, good drainage, consistent moisture while establishing. That's the formula. And one very important thing, do not shear Japanese maples into shapes. The natural branch structure is the entire beauty of the tree. You're not forcing geometry onto it. You're allowing it to develop character over time. That patience is exactly why mature Japanese maples make homes feel established and expensive, because they look like something that evolved naturally over decades instead of being installed all at once from a landscaping truck. And honestly, that feeling of maturity and permanence is one of the hardest things to fake in landscaping. Now, we've covered 6 plants, but the final one might actually be the most important for making modern foundation planting feel professional instead of outdated, because this last plant solves something almost every front yard struggles with: visual heaviness. Plant 7, Karl Foerster grass. And honestly, this plant might be the single easiest way to make a front yard look more modern, because most older foundation plantings suffer from the exact same visual problem. They feel heavy, too many dense shrubs, too much dark green, too much visual weight sitting low against the house. Ornamental grasses completely change that. They introduce movement, lightness, texture, and vertical rhythm without making landscaping feel busy. And Karl Foerster is probably the most reliable ornamental grass ever introduced for American landscapes. Tall, upright form, clean structure, beautiful movement in wind. And unlike floppy grasses that collapse by midsummer, Karl Foerster stays remarkably vertical. That's why professional landscapers use it constantly around modern homes, farmhouse landscapes, craftsman homes, contemporary front yards, and higher-end suburban properties, because it instantly creates that professionally designed feeling. And one of the biggest landscaping trends happening right now is moving away from flat rows of foundation shrubs toward layered mixed planting with texture and movement. That's exactly where ornamental grasses shine. Karl Foerster works best in zones 5 through 9. Full sun, average soil, moderate watering while establishing, and once mature, it becomes extremely low maintenance. One cutback in late winter or very early spring before new growth begins. That's basically it. Now, visually, this plant solves something homeowners rarely understand consciously, but immediately feel emotionally. It breaks static landscaping. When wind moves through ornamental grass, the entire front yard feels more alive. That movement creates softness around architecture, especially around brick, stone, dark siding, or modern rectangular homes. And at golden hour, few plants photograph better. Now, we've covered all 7 plants, but honestly, the plants themselves are only half the reason some front yards look incredible. The other half is composition. And this is where most homeowners accidentally make expensive mistakes, because even beautiful plants can look wrong if the layout is wrong. The first rule: depth. Most American foundation beds are too shallow, 3 feet deep, maybe 4. That creates the classic outdated row of shrubs look: flat, heavy, one-dimensional. Modern foundation planting is moving toward deeper, layered beds instead, 6 to 8 feet deep whenever space allows. That extra depth changes everything, because now you can layer taller structure plants toward the back, flowering shrubs in the middle, softer textures and perennials toward the front. Suddenly, the landscaping has dimension instead of looking like a hedge stuck against the house. The second rule: stop planting giant shrubs directly under windows. This is probably the biggest curb appeal mistake in suburban landscaping. Overgrown shrubs hiding architecture instantly date a house. Your landscaping should frame the house, not swallow it. Windows matter visually. Front entries matter visually. Roof lines matter visually. The plants should support those features, not hide them. And honestly, this is why so many older front yards feel dark and outdated. Too much visual blockage. The third rule: mix textures. This is one of the biggest landscaping trends for 2026. Layered, naturalistic planting with contrasting texture instead of rigid rows. That means boxwoods beside grasses, hydrangeas beside lavender, hostas beside junipers, structured plants beside softer flowing plants. That contrast creates visual energy. Without it, everything blends into one green mass. The fourth rule: less mulch. And I know some people are going to disagree with this, but giant empty seas of mulch instantly make landscaping feel cheaper and more dated, especially dyed red mulch. The goal is not mulch with plants. The goal is plants with minimal visible mulch. The landscaping should eventually become full enough that the plants themselves dominate visually. That's what makes front yards feel mature and established. And finally, the biggest mistake of all: planting for year 1 instead of year 10. Everything at the nursery looks tiny. That's deceptive. People panic about empty space, plant too densely, and then spend years fighting overcrowding. Healthy foundation planting needs breathing room. A front yard that looks slightly sparse during the first season often becomes perfectly balanced later. Patience matters more than people realize in landscaping. Because honestly, most expensive-looking front yards are not necessarily filled with rare plants. They simply look intentional. Good spacing, good layering, good structure, good proportions. That's what people emotionally respond to, not random collections of plants. And one final thing before we wrap up: you do not need to redo your entire front yard at once. That's one of the biggest reasons people never start. Pick one area, one outdated corner, one overgrown shrub, one empty space near the entry. Start there. One good plant in the right location with the right spacing can completely change how the entire front of the house feels, and that effect compounds over time. Now I want to hear from you. Which one of these plants would you actually put in your front yard first? And more importantly, what's the biggest problem with your current foundation planting? Too much maintenance? Too many overgrown shrubs? Not enough color? Everything dies in summer? Drop it in the comments. I read them constantly, and they genuinely help shape future videos. And if this video helped you avoid even one expensive landscaping mistake, subscribe. New videos every week. Practical gardening advice, low-maintenance landscaping, modern curb appeal ideas, real homeowner solutions, and foundation planting strategies that actually work long-term. No filler, no fake trends, no sponsored nonsense, just landscaping advice that helps your house look better season after season. All right, get outside when you can.